a lot of leased ground. So do you have any wisdom for, working with whoever you're leasing to in terms of not getting locked into a bad lease, and maybe putting in some drought contingencies into that? Do you have any wisdom there?
Well, most of my lease ground is federal, and just a little bit private.
So what are the sideboards that the BLM is putting on, or state land, for example, in terms of, if we get a drought?
Well, I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
I've always been very cautious.
Yeah.
Well, there's no feed down. It's a winter permit, the one I'm relying on. There's no feed there.
The cows aren't going to engage.
They're not going to go down there.
How about you, Kenny?
Oh, my leases are 5-year to 1-year leases, and it's my choice, what I put on there. So I manage it. It's just up to me. So I make the call. I pay them so much an acre every year, and if it's dry, it's on me. So
yeah,
I make that choice. I stock it accordingly, and I, time and time again, it's overgrazing it. The cattle don't do as good, and the land doesn't do as good. You're a lot better off understocking it. You'll get more pounds off that set of with less cattle than you will if you overstock it, trying to, you get less weight on them. It's just, we've seen it time and time again. It works a lot better to understock, especially during these last, 10 or 15 years we've been in. It's just so unpredictable and dry, so we have to understock so we can continue next year.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk to David about CARM, or either Justin or David. Can you kind of explain what CARM is and what that stands for?
Sure. So CARM stands for Collaborative Adaptive Rangeland Management, and this is really a reference to an experiment that we've been doing at our experimental range since the last drought. So we started in 2013, right after the 2012 drought. And what we're doing there is running an experiment at the scale of our experimental range, which is at the scale of an individual ranch, where we are working with a group of ranchers as well as representatives from conservation organizations, particularly those interested in bird conservation, and then also people from land management agencies. So the Forest Service, who manages the national grasslands, NRCS, CSU Extension. So Annie is our representative for the project from CSU Extension. And so what we're trying to do here is, instead of, in the past, Justin and I run lots of experiments with cattle at the experimental range, and then we report the results. But this was more trying to work collaboratively with a group of people who really understand Eastern Colorado and care about both the livestock, the grass, and as well as the wildlife in Eastern Colorado. And how do we flex our stocking rates? How do we move cattle in space and time? And how do we adjust our stocking rates each year based on all the tools that we have available to us in terms of weather forecasting, in terms of monitoring vegetation condition. And then finally, we're also trying to bring in some of the economics that John Britton can speak to a little bit later. So basically, we have a herd of cattle that, again, we are only running yearlings, so it's a little more flexible and a little easier for us. But all of these yearlings are contracted for sale in October. So our rancher, right now we can't sell them early. So our goal really is to be able to carry those cattle all the way through to October 1st so they can be sold on contract at that time. And so we maybe have less flexibility than what we just heard from Kenny and Steve in terms of, when we can destock. So we're really trying to be conservative enough to make sure that we can get our yearlings all the way through to October, and we want them to be gaining weight. So last year, for the month of September, some of our pastures, the yearlings were losing weight towards the end of September. We want to keep them in positive weight gain territory, and ideally, what our collaborating ranchers want is from May to October, they want to average 2 pounds per head per day or better on all those yearlings. So we can get anywhere from 3 to 4 pounds per head per day when it's nice and green in May and June. But we really have to think carefully about our forage budget and trying to project how much forage are we going to have through the growing season, and not just old dead forage, but how much growth. So how do we use all these different tools that are out there for rangeland monitoring to help us both adjust our stocking rate at the beginning of the growing season? So we're setting our stocking rate in April. So Steve said he has an important decision date of April 15th. That's a really important date for us too. We have the capacity to reduce the number of yearlings we're going to run somewhat. We're placing the orders in October, but we can adjust in April the number that we're going to run somewhat, typically up or down 10%. And so we're trying to, how do we use different tools to make that decision? And then as we go through the growing season, how do we move those cattle? We have a fairly wide range of pastures that vary in their species composition. We have about half of our pastures are dominated by blue grama. About half are dominated more by western wheatgrass and needle and thread. So we have some opportunities to move cattle within the growing season to try to respond to shortages of forage and keep them on the greenest part of the vegetation, and also making sure that they're in a place where they have enough vegetation to be gaining weight, not getting into a weight loss situation. So that's kind of a broad overview of what the CARM experiment is. Like I said, we have more resources, and because it's an experimental ranch, we have a lot of people out there monitoring the vegetation, and we also have a lot of folks working in the office with the remote sensing products, trying to see how we can better use remote sensing to keep track of our forage availability as well.
Right, so that's been one of the really cool things about working with your group, is to see the different tools that have been developed that are, and I don't even know this, and I should, but for example, has GrassCast come out of this group? Is that where GrassCast came from? Not CARM specifically, but it came out of long-term. It started with long-term records from the experimental range. From the experimental range. Okay, yeah.
Right, and
that is some of the coolest data that I've seen. Is the experimental range has been going for how long? Is it 80 years?
Yes. So it was created in response to the Dust Bowl at the same time that Pawnee National Grassland and Comanche National Grassland were created. And it was created to study as a site to help study beef production for ranchers in eastern Colorado in response to the Dust Bowl. And so one of the great things is the early people that ran this, they started in 1939, and we have really great records of forage production and cattle weight gains and stocking rates in all of, it's subdivided into about 40 different pastures. So we have good records in many of those pastures going all the way back to 1939 of exactly what was the stocking rate and how well did those cattle gain.
Right, and one of the interesting things that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago was that data has informed some of the NRCS stocking rate.
Yes.
Stocking rate. So that's I was really interested to see where did this data come from, and it's from this long-term experimental range.
That's
so
right.
David, can you share some of the tools that you have developed for predicting production?
So what I want to talk about first is just one extra step that's out there available to be used with GrassCast and the Drought Monitor. So I'll just share my screen. So can you see the drought monitor now?
Yeah.
Great. So when we look at the drought monitor, Danelle showed this at the scale of Colorado, but it's very coarse, right? We know, I mean, Steve and Kenny already know that southeast Colorado here is in a severe drought, and Justin and I already know that Weld counties, not in a severe drought, but we're definitely below normal. And that's what the drought monitor shows. And then, like Danelle showed, you can go into GrassCast and see what it's predicting for the future in terms of where are we going with forage production. But one other tool that I always like to go into and look at is called VegDry. And so VegDry, it's VEGDRI, and you can just Google that and you'll end up, it's the Vegetation Drought Response Index. And you can zoom into a map for any state in the Great Plains. And what this is it's not a measure of where we're going in the future. It's a measure of where you are right now. How much forage do you have on the ground right now? And the one nice thing about this compared to GrassCast is you can get a little more detail. So this is at a 1 by 1 kilometer grid. And so let's see here. This is El Paso County. Can you see my mouse?
Yep, we can see it.
So here we are in El Paso. And what you can see here is, so Kenny, are you in northern or southern El Paso?
Southern. I'm right on the Pueblo County line north.
And what you can see here in VegDry is if you are in southern El Paso, that's a really different situation than if you were in northeastern El Paso. And the other thing it can do is tell you a little bit about the variability. Now, typically, I would say a rancher's going to know more about the variability on their property than this product. But if you have a large ranch or if you have multiple properties spread out, this can give you some better information just on how variable is it across your region. So you can see that southeastern Colorado broadly is in severe drought. And if we go back to GrassCast, Otero and Bent County maybe aren't quite as bad as the rest, but if you look at this average map, I mean, all of southeast Colorado looks terrible in terms of what they're projecting through the future. However, if you go into VegDry, it becomes clear that there are portions of Otero and Bent County that caught some nice rainstorms here. You go up, what is this, Crowley, south, there are patches in here that are actually above average in vegetation biomass right now, in forage biomass. And they're right next to places that are below average. So this can give you an idea of just how variable it is at a finer spatial scale. This is still very limited. What I don't like about this product right now is it's very hard to see where your ranch is on this map. So what I do in working with CPR, and CPR is the Central Plains Experimental Range, and also in working with the ranchers that graze on Pawnee National Grassland, is I can download this map. We go up to northeastern Colorado. I can download the map for Weld County and import it into my geographic information system and then overlay my pasture boundaries on it and look specifically at a fine scale of what it's showing for my pastures. And that's not something you can do online. And so what I would say is the next step, what I think is missing right now in terms of resources available to ranchers is the availability for somebody like Kenny or Steve to come and zoom in to a specific pasture and see what that is looking like relative to the long term. And so what's really nice about this VegDry map is it's taking 30 years of data and saying, where are you right now relative to the long-term mean? And as humans, it's hard for us to remember what the 30-year long-term mean is. Sometimes some people are really smart and have great memories. I don't know what the long-term mean is for the past 30 years in every pasture on the Central Plains Experimental Range. But this can just help my memory by enabling me to zoom in and see where are we right now relative to that long-term mean in each of the pastures. Because I can download this and work with it personally in my GIS, I can see each individual pasture at our experimental range. Right now, that capability isn't available to ranchers, and so I think that's the next step. That we're working with a couple of postdocs in our unit and other folks who are really good with remote sensing products to try to get it to where a rancher could actually log in and see where are they right now relative to the long-term mean. Based on the rate at which the satellites go over the Earth right now, Annie, we can't get yesterday's data. So we can't download and see where are we yesterday, but we can get an estimate typically within the past week of sometime in the last week. Say, sometimes you can get it 4 to 5 days old, maybe sometimes it's 6 to 7 days old. But you can download and get a map at very high resolution of every parcel within your ranch. Where do you stand in terms of your greenness relative to the past 30 years? We just need to work on making that available and seeing how that might help above and beyond just driving around and looking at your pastures.
Right. Do you have an example?
Oh, did you want me to? I didn't bring that up. I can work on bringing that up right now. You want me to show the example that we have for the Central Plains Experimental Range?
Sure.
It's going to take me a minute to find that. So
okay.
If you have some other things, I will bring that up in a second.
Right. Why don't we switch to John Ritten from Wyoming? John, you're the economist, and it's always important, I think, to bring in, the marketing and economics into our situation right now. Would you like to talk about our economics in light of COVID and the drought?
You're muted, John.
There we go. Now I'm unmuted. Sorry about that.
No problem.
So let me bring this screen up and share. Come on, hold on a second. My computer's going slow now. There
Maybe it's the kids are watching a movie right now.
Here we go. Start. Now it won't let me share. Hold on. I kicked David off. Now here we go.
I have mine up now if you want me to go back in.
Well, I just got, can you guys see mine now?
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay, sorry. I'll get through it real quick. See, this will make me quick, David. The economist always runs long, but I always talk too fast. All right, so yeah, this is a unique drought situation. I've been studying drought since my time down at CSU, so I've been kind of living this for quite a while. There's kind of two things we need to plan for the drought. One is, what do we do now, right? We're in it, we need to react, but then also what do we do to prepare ourselves to be situated for success in the future? I was really glad to hear that, you write your drought plan when it's wet, not when it's dry. So if you're doing it now, we're going to try to scrape through and get by, but as soon as it rains again, start preparing for the next drought. So what do we do now? My question is when I talk to producers, the first thing you need to know, what feed options do you have right now? You need a good inventory of what you have and where. Again, so all of those tools we've talked about so far, GrassCast and David's, the veg dry really is helpful, but you need to go out and ground truth that and figure out where you have feed and what you can do. The second thing I'm going to say, and again, this is out of my expertise, I'm an economist, right? What can your range handle for the rest of this year, right? Get an idea of those stock days available to you. What is your supply of food, right, for those cows or for your yearlings? The second thing I'm going to challenge you to do is you need to make some short versus long-term decisions here, right? We're all trying to get through the next 6 to 12 months. I want you to think about the next 6 to 12 years. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But I'm pretty sure, given all the graphs I've seen, we need to decrease our demand for forage. And one of the things we need to do, I think it was Steve that said it, maybe Kenny referenced it as well, is what I'm probably going to do right now. If I'm out there on the ground, is I'm probably going to wean my calves and get them out of there. And then I'm going to selectively cull cows. And I'm going to do those with a couple specific reasons. Getting those calves off that cow, even if they're not eating grass, but at this point in time, depending on your calving day, they're probably consuming some forage as well. But even if not, right, they're getting their energy from the range through mama, right? And so let's get those calves off. Let those cows start to hopefully rebuild some body condition, because if we're keeping them over the winter and accruing those expenses, we need them to produce a calf next year. We need to give her every chance possible to, if she's not pregnant yet, get pregnant. If she is pregnant, maintain that pregnancy and deliver a calf and wean that calf next fall. So let's do everything we can for her to get her through that. And then the other reason I'm going to wean now or as soon as possible, right? I think it was Kenny said the next 2 weeks, right? Prices are going to go down again, right? COVID related, maybe not, but we're also getting into the seasonal dip here. So here, I'm going to show you a couple of graphs. I try to minimize my graphs, but I need to show a couple. This is the Southern Plains. This is kind of aggregated across all the Southern Plains. The red line is the 2014, 2018. That's a 5-year weekly average price, and this is those 4 to 5 weight steer calves. The dotted line is what happened last year. Up until about March, that solid blue line is this year. We were tracking pretty close. We were going to have a repeat of 2019, and we see that big dip. That is response to packing plants closing. When the packing plants close because of the COVID outbreaks, what happens? Feedlots have nowhere to send their fats. Their fats are standing around in stalls eating feed. Guess what? They can't bring in more animals. Guess what? They don't want to buy any animals right now, so the bidding stops, prices drop. We've just about come back from that as the plants have reopened. Now, I'm not going to say they're going to stay open. I'm not going to say they're going to close, but it's a risk of a roll of the dice at this time. It is a little bit risky as to what happens the next time we have a big packing plant go down. Just to show you, this is not just to this 4.5 or 4 to 5 pound or 4 to 5 weight steer class. Same thing for yearlings, right? We had that 750 pound class, same thing, track in 2019 really well. End of March, dropped off. July 1st, we're kind of back to normal, but now we're starting to see that tail off, partly because it's getting dry and more animals are coming to market already, so we're starting to depress prices. So I will go back one slide here to that 4.5 weight, 5 weight steer class. Notice that the seasonal peak for those lighter calves in the Southern Plains is earlier than most guys bring their calves to market anyways. If we're bringing them the first week of October, we've missed the high point in prices. Same thing for the yearlings. It's going to peak about August and then start to drop off. So this year, I would argue, we're probably not going to get a lot of gain on those animals in the next 3 months anyways. We're probably going to do some maybe long-term damage, or at least short-term defoliation of those plants. So I want you to really think hard about, is it worth keeping them out there to put on a few more pounds and then get a lower price? I really think we can move on. Same thing's true for the Northern Plains. This is South Dakota. Again, that 4 to 5 weight steer class. They were actually trending above last year for a couple months at the end of June. But again, look at that seasonal price peak in the red. It really does peak a lot earlier, and then as calves come to market, it drops off. So I want to get there before this peak this year anyways, because this is going to be steeper than it's been in recent years. Because there's going to be more animals coming sooner. It's going to happen before we're used to it. So here's my big question for everybody. How do we prepare for the next year and beyond, right? This is where we need Danelle and Justin and David to tell us where are we headed, right? What's going to happen? From a marketing perspective, I can tell you one thing is important, right? A lot of the work I've done has showed that we really need to manage in response to precipitation, to climate and weather, but the markets really drive profitability. If we can manage around nature to take advantage of markets, that's when we do the best. Given the latest cattle inventory numbers, we passed the peak of our expansion phase last year. We are now on the downward side of the cattle cycle. Why does that matter? Prices are negatively correlated to inventory. So in a normal circumstance, as national herd numbers decline, cattle prices increase. I'm going to say should because there's two things at play here. One is COVID, right? So whether that's packing plants impacting demand for live cattle, or if it's unemployment rates for the next couple of years, if producer incomes are down, they have less available money to spend on products like beef. So the next 2 years could be impacted by COVID, and then drought. That's why we saw that huge spike in prices in 2014, because we wanted to expand, but the Southern Plains drought held us back longer than it should have, given just cattle inventory. People couldn't respond to the price signals because they didn't have grass. So here's what our cattle inventory has done for the last 30 years now. You can see that, you know, we had really higher numbers in the early 90s. In fact, it's been dropping since about the 70s. We're right here, right? We're past that peak. The peak happened last year, dropping off. Are we going to expand quickly, or are we going to continue to decline? That's the big question from the economic side. I will say that data suggests we are still going to decline. This is heifers held as replacements, right? So if we have less heifers held back, we know cows get cold every year. It means as we decrease our retention, we are shrinking the national herd. It's down again 2% as of January 1. I would expect that number to increase in response to the drought. I would expect 2021, January 1 numbers to be down even more. So I think we're still contracting. And again, here's a graph that shows this red number is national cattle numbers. The blue line is that 5 to 6 weight steer class in Western Kansas, right? As numbers go down, prices go up, and we respond to prices as we expect producers to do. They start to build back their herds and prices decline. So this is where we're looking. Again, what's going to happen in the next year? No economist is going to tell you what we're going to do for sure. I will say that we're probably going to continue to see a reduction in numbers. This is the percent change in inventory. We just came out of a 5-year expansionary phase. We're in the first year of a contraction. All these other contractions have been 5 to 7 years. A typical cattle cycle is 8 to 14 years. Most are in 10 to 12. So we're going to have some years where we have declining numbers, right? So what does that mean for you? If I'm running the ranch, I want to get through this year. That's fine. I want to make sure I can still ranch next year, but I'm thinking about 3 to 6 years from now. That's when there are no major global issues from COVID that are more than a couple years. That's where we're going to see the peak in the cattle prices again. It's probably that 5 to 6 years out. So what do I want to do? It's probably less problematic to destock heavier now, especially those older cows, because they got 2 or 3 calves left in them. They're really producing these low value products for us, right? I'd rather, as both Kenny and Steve referenced to, let's give the range a chance to come back so that we can restock sooner and start to retain those younger heifers, those younger cows that are starting their production right at the peak of that, right before the peak of that cycle, right? I want them to produce high value crops. This is the stock market, right? Buy low, sell high. In the next year or two, this year's calf crop and next year's calf crop, I can retain those heifers pretty cheap because they're not worth as much as their counterparts are going to be in 3 or 4 years. So let's keep back the cheaper heifers that can produce more valuable heifers 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years down the road. Now, with that being said, should you retain heifers this year? Well, what Justin just said about the PDO, the Enzo, right? Next year is not looking great. I might not keep a lot of heifers back this year, right? I might continue to destock, prepare myself for that next swing in the El Nino, La Nina phase, prepare myself to take advantage of that, let my grass recover, make sure that it bounces back. However, again, depending on your heifer development strategy, if you keep those back and you're going to put them in a dry lot anyways, and you have some stored feed, or you can go purchase some feed at an economical price, you may not be damaging the range. If you think your area is going to get wet again next year, right? This is not a terrible strategy, but if we're in for another dry year, the last thing you want to do is keep a heifer back for a year, not cash that check she would have given you this fall, put a bunch of feed costs in here to develop her, and then have to sell her next year before she pays you back for any of those expenses. Again, so the big question is how long will this drought be with us? 1 year, 5 year, 10 years? Justin, we need some answers. Danelle, we need some answers, please. The other option, if you destock heavily this year and it greens up, right? It's already been alluded to here. You can bring some yearlings in, right? I mean, that's the flex strategy. It's a lot of work we've done from New Mexico up to Montana would suggest that having that flex as a way to use the green grass in years it's there as yearlings is a profitable strategy. One of the worst things you can do with a cow is sell her when she's young and productive. So if you've got a heifer that's produced 1 calf and she's pregnant and you don't have grass and sell her, she's not going to pay for herself when you sell her, right? So you want those cows to live out their productive life with you. So when you have extra grass, building your cow herd is problematic because it's going to get dry again. We've seen that. So if you bring in yearlings just for the year or two to take advantage of that extra grass and make a little bit of extra money, that really is a strategy that I think can help. Again, it's a flexible strategy, but again, it's a lot of guys in Wyoming, and 86% of our guys are cow-calf guys. And I say, if you haven't had yearlings out there, just be prepared. It's different, right? I've got younger kids. I'm still prepping for the teenagers, but I imagine it's a lot like having a bunch of teenage boys in the house for a weekend, right? Fences are going to get beat up. Water tanks are going to get beat up. So just be prepared for that. It's a different infrastructure. It's a different way to manage, but you can do it. That is what I had. Annie, any questions before we jump to David?
That was perfect. Thank you so much for putting this in perspective, John. And we'll end this pretty quickly, but really quick, do either of Kenny or Steve want to chime in on anything that John just spoke about?
Well, for me, one of the advantages I have in regards to the markets is we've stepped out of the traditional route of selling calves. We actually we've developed a grass-fed market, so we're not in the commodity market. So that price swing doesn't affect us. In fact, our prices have not gone down. Our demand has gone way up. I don't have enough animals now to sell, which is a good thing to have. Mm-hmm. It's just right now I don't have enough grass to manage everything. So the other thing I was going to say was that because of the composition of our herd, it's real difficult to manage everything. So we've got cow, calf, yearling, and or stocker, what I call stocker, and then the direct market animals. So it's difficult to manage all that together in light of our grass situation. So
yep. So COVID's been a good thing for you in terms of direct market sales.
COVID has been fantastic.
Good to hear it.
My phone does not quit ringing.
Great. Kenny, your situation's different because you have quite a few more cattle. Anything that you wanna say? I mean, these are two really different strategies that you both have, and it seems to be working for both of you. Anything you want to add? Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
Really quick, what that last comment you said is that they're very different operations and they both work. There is no single strategy that's going to work for every ranch. So I always tell people this when I'm giving an extension talk, if your financial advisor or your economist tells you what to do, get a new one because they don't know your goals, objectives, and situation, right? We can give you ideas and different outlooks, but only you know what's going to work for you to fit both your lifestyle and your business management strategies. So again, we can give you an outlook, but if either one of those tells you here's how you do it, they're a bad example of either one of those categories. So yeah.
Kenny, did you want to chime in?
Well, yeah, all I was going to say is just like you said, I mean, you can cull some of these older cows and then keep some heifers. They eat a lot less grass, and so those are some things that I look at doing is getting rid of some old cows and then retaining some heifers, and it gets you down the road a little bit, and they don't eat as much. So it's a way to kind of keep your numbers up, but use less forage.
Right.
So.
Right. Great. Thanks. All right, David. Let's switch to you and a new tool that you have coming up, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, thanks, Annie. I will try to go quickly through this. I'll try to hit on two things that John just highlighted from the economic side. And one he said is you got to know how much forage you have. And the other thing he said is it helps to know where to look for forage, right? So again, I go back to the veg dry. Another great way to use veg dry is just to help you understand what the recent patterns of rainfall are off of your property if you're going to go look for other leases or other sources of forage.
Right.
And so, Steve, yeah, you're saying you just don't have grass, but I'd be talking to people in northeastern Pueblo County, or over maybe even in northwestern Crowley County. I mean, there are places out there that, even though southeast Colorado is locked in a drought, there are patches with above average forage, and if those ranchers don't have the capacity to take advantage of it, maybe you can. The other thing I wanted to bring in was estimating forage productivity. Sorry, so when you look at this map, I'm going to go up to northeastern Colorado now, into Weld County, where Justin and I work. Our experimental range is right here, so we're looking pretty white. We are near average to slightly below average because of the recent rains. But what does this mean in terms of actual on-the-ground forage production? Like John said, how many pounds per acre do you have? So what we're working on, this is an example of how we might be able to move forward for individual operations. This is a website that was put together for using remote sensing for the Central Plains Experimental Range. This shows this is the outline of our range. So this is a 16,000 acre property, and it's showing 20 individual pastures that we manage for this rotational herd. This line here shows us where we are, averaged over all 16,000 acres. Where are we in terms of greenness? And so we're, perfectly average would be up here right now. We're at the bottom end of moving into below average. But what does that mean? And then here's a map colored of the condition in terms of greenness in all of our pastures. So you can see it's fairly even across all of them right now. But what does this mean in terms of pounds per acre? So what we can then do is for each of these individual pastures, each one shown on this map is 320 acres, so a half section. We can take that and turn it into pounds per acre. And I'll just show you an example of some drought forage budgeting that we were doing for two different herds within the CARM experiment. So we have CARM 1 and CARM 2. Do you see my Excel sheet now?
Yep.
So each of these are 122 yearling herds. And for the first herd, we have 3 pastures that we're hoping to use for that herd in rotation to get us to October 1st for the contract date. And then CARM 2, we have 3 pastures that we hope to use. And we were able to generate, here are our pounds per acre estimated as of June 18th from that remote sensing. So we can get pounds per acre. Then we had some new growth that happened as a result of the rainfall that we received on June 27th. So this is where we estimate we currently are right now in each of these 6 pastures in terms of pounds per acre. And so what we've decided is some of them we're going to graze down to 300 pounds per acre. These 2 pastures have a little different plant species composition, so we only want to graze them down to 400 pounds per acre. So we can calculate how much grazable forage we have to get us to October in pounds per acre in each of these pastures. Now what we know is we estimate for ours that 122 yearlings in a half section pasture will eat about 8 pounds per acre per day. So we know this is our estimate of how many days we have of available forage to carry that herd in each of these pastures. And then we also know that the longer we leave a herd in a pasture, the more it impacts that vegetation. And we, based on the past 8 years of experience with the stakeholders we work with, especially the ranchers, don't want us grazing any of these pastures for longer than 42 days. So even though we have a lot of foraging here, they don't want us to graze it more than 42 days. So here's the actual grazing days that we think we have in each pasture. And we know that we need 92 days of grazable forage to get us to our contract date. So what we knew as of July 1st, we knew that for this herd, we only have about 86 days of grazable forage, and we think we're going to come up 6 days short. And for this herd of 122 yearlings, we have enough forage to get us through right to 92 days. So this is how we're using the remote sensing. And what I can show you is if we didn't have this rainfall event right here, when I did these calculations on June 20th, we were nowhere going to make it to October 1st. So we were really concerned and starting to have to look at like, okay, should we be looking to move them somewhere off the property, or what are we going to do? But then we caught that rain on June 27th, and that's what's moved us up to where on one herd, we're now just 6 days short. We're going to wait and see what happens with our subsequent forage production, and our other herd, we're right where we want to be. So that's how we're using these actual, these remote sensing products that just give you these colored maps to turn it into actual grazing days and try to get to where John wants us to be in knowing our available forage on the ground. And then you can also think about selling early. Like I said, the producers that own these yearlings all want to make it to October 1st. They don't want to sell them earlier this year, but there's a lot of other opportunities to sell earlier if you don't have that contract.
So David, I have one question. Did you measure the new growth? How did you know that you were going to get that much new growth to put into your Excel spreadsheet?
Well,
from the rain event.
That was estimated from experiments that we've done at the experimental range. What we're going to do, what I've asked our remote sensing specialists to do, so right now you can see this goes through July 7th, right? And today is July 10th. When we get to about July 15th, so we have the current week's satellite imagery, about July 15th, we'll re-estimate the biomass just from remote sensing only.
Oh, okay.
And see how that compares with what we predicted to get from that rain. And we'll have a better estimate of exactly what we have on the ground as of July 15th. And we haven't had any rain since June 27th, so nothing's, there's no new inputs of moisture. So probably by July 15th or so, we'll have a pretty good estimate of how much we got total out of that.
Right. But you could say in general, in the blue grama kind of ecosystem, after you got the rain, if we go back to the Excel spreadsheet, you're getting what? How many pounds more? Okay, so
when you have drought-stressed vegetation, which is where we were here, imagine these pastures are mostly blue grama dominated with some western wheat and some needle and thread, and they varied anywhere from crossroads had been grazed heavily, so that one was all the way down to 300 pounds per acre. So this is like pretty much grazed into the ground.
So this is grazed into the ground blue grama.
Yeah, and highway and nighthawk here at 500 to 600 pounds per acre. That was a mixture of standing blue grama, and neither of those pastures have been grazed yet this year. So they've got a mixture of blue grama and western wheatgrass. That's standing, but it's drought stress. Like normally at that time of year, we would expect those to be all the way up at about 750 to 800 pounds per acre. So they have not been producing well. They're about 30% below where we would like them to be. What we find is with that kind of drought-stressed vegetation, if you know how much you have, if you put an inch of rain on that, you'll get about a 15% increase in biomass.
Did you say 15?
15. If you put 2 inches of rain on it, if you add 2 inches of rain, you'll get about a 30% increase in biomass. So that's how we estimate what we're going to get. Now, if you have vegetation that's not been drought stressed and you put an inch of rain on it, you're going to get more than 15% increase. This is if you got drought stressed vegetation and you put an inch of rain on it, you're going to get about a 15% increase in biomass.
So when I was measuring Kenny's pasture and he got that incredible increase in production, the plants would have been drought stressed, but there would have been a lot of litter on the ground. So that's probably why he got so much more production.
Yes, and that's why we do it as a percentage. So here, these three pastures, in terms of basal cover of vegetation, are all about the same.
Yeah.
Okay. But these two pastures have standing biomass and cover of dead vegetation from last year. So they're going to get a 15% increase above 600, whereas this one's only going to get a 15% increase above 300. At least that's how we budget.
Okay. All right, that's a good clarification. Thank you. Is there anything else you were going to add to that?
No, I do. This is very preliminary.
Yeah.
I mean, we have this up and running and working quite well for these 20 pastures. When you go to Veg Dry, each of these little squares is 1 square kilometer.
Yeah.
So wait, how many acres? 247 acres. Here in these maps, each square is, down at scale of an acre. So you can really zoom in and see within an individual square mile what the variation in forage is. And I can actually see here patterns of lowlands and highlands within these pastures, lowlands and uplands, and how much the forage varies. So that's where we're trying to get it down to where you can actually see on a given ranch, where do I have forage, where don't I have forage, how does it vary within and among my fencing in my pastures and my fencing infrastructure, and how does that translate into pounds per acre? Those are all the difficult things that currently are only at a provisional stage.
Right. Well, I love this tool because I get so many questions on leases. So for me, I'm thinking, or for a rancher, if you're thinking about picking up a lease and really kind of figuring out how much that lease is worth, this tool is fantastic for that.
Yeah, at least the one thing you can do is try to find that lease in Veg Dry.
Yeah, and that too.
Is it in, speckled, if it's in an area of speckled white and yellow and green, yeah, I'd go check it out. And if it's over here, definitely not. Right.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, David, for showing us all that information. I think let's wrap it up. We've gone over. I mean, this is great. Is there anything else that anyone wants to say before we wrap it up? Did I miss anything? Justin? Nope. Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for everybody joining in. I think this was an awesome discussion, and we are recording this. So we will put it out on CSU's website, our range extension website, Facebook, and then anyone else who wants to post it. So thanks everybody so much for joining in.
Annie, I'll just add for any producers or land managers that are watching, like John and others said, we would be irresponsible if we gave you answers as extension agents and agency personnel, but we are here to help, and we're going to put our contacts at the end of this video. If there's any of these tools that you're interested in learning more about, or for all of us, but particularly those of us in extension, anything at all that we can help with to help you get a little closer to your answer that you're looking for, or any management decisions you need to make, please do not hesitate to reach out. That's what we're here for. That's what we're paid to do.
Great.
And thanks to all the panelists.
After visiting your extension agent or educator, also stop by your nearest USDA service center. Be sure to check in with your Farm Service Agency folks or your Natural Resources Conservation Service folks, and they have programs that might be able to help you, get through this year's drought or become more resilient in the future.
Great. Thanks, Danelle.